had TV ads, and I had a TV ad where I was holding a newborn baby and said, I care about the misuse of drugs just like anybody else, but I care about the misuse of this war on drugs even more so. And we did that. And the biggest surprise came at their headquarters on the night of the primary, and the governor, who's now our president, was at the headquarters of the other guy for their celebration party. And they had very little to celebrate. So the Democrats came up with a candidate, and they knew the best thing to do, so they spent $1 million attacking me on the drug issue. Same thing happened to them. There's a couple of things here. One, I had to give the proper answer. I had to make sure they did not think that I endorsed or was sympathetic to people who used illegal drugs, because I personally don't like drugs. I don't want my kids and my grandkids on drugs, and I could be very sincere and come across and say that I don't want this, and why I don't like the war on drugs is A, B, and C. And that came across, and that was very important. But the other thing I think where there's a miscalculation, this is why we should be encouraged, is I think Congress is at least 20 or 25 years behind the people on this issue. We're way ahead of it, and the Libertarian Party has led the charge on this, and you'll probably never get the credit, but the people are waking up to this. I had a conservative member from Colorado. Matter of fact, he was one of the ones that was saying this terrible mistake he made, on the Patriot Act. But he came and asked me about doing some legislation and what I knew about getting rid of these federal mandatory sentences for nonviolent drug people. Now, for me to introduce the bill and talk about that is one thing, but to have somebody else starting to think that way, they're hearing that message back at home. So we should be encouraged that we're eventually going to win that argument. We've won the argument, but now we have to win the legislative battle, and that hopefully will come pretty soon. The recently, we had a major vote on the education bill, and the Republican position for 20 years has not been too bad. It's getting rid of the Department of Education. They gave lip service to get the federal government out of education. Education was a very important issue in my campaign. The key people that did my legwork were homeschoolers. Homeschoolers who had been quite willing to accept the libertarian by having it explained to them that civil libertarians are going to protect their right to homeschool their kids as well as better than anybody else. So they became very, very strong supporters. And my position has always been very simple and plain for practical and constitutional reasons. The federal government ought to be out of public education completely and totally. Well, we knew that the president was anxious to undermine the libertarian control of the Republican Party. So he immediately changed the platform. So we knew right after his nomination they got rid of this weird position of getting rid of the Department of Education. So you knew it was coming. So the education bill gets passed. Now, who are the greatest champions of the Republican education bill? George Miller and Ted Kennedy. Yet all the Republicans went along with it. And half of them that voted for it probably felt about it like I did. But still, they went along and voted. How can you stand up against the president? Well, that's what you're supposed to do if he's doing something wrong. I'm on the banking committee again. It's a position that I wanted, and I want to deal with monetary policy because someday the people of the country are going to wake up and really understand why we have a financial bubble and why the monetary system is corrupt and we have to do something. But we have an Ayn Rand follower at the head of the Fed. I don't know why we're not doing a little bit better. But a year ago or so, we had a little session with Greenspan before we were having hearings. They said, well, if you want to come in and have a personal chat with Greenspan and get your picture taken, you could do that. And I thought, well, I'm going to do that. That sounds like a good idea. And so I went in, but before I went back to Washington that week, I went back and I dug up the original copies of the Objectivist newsletter, which I was receiving in the 60s, and I found that wonderful article that Greenspan wrote, and so this was a faded green copy of the Objectivist, but Greenspan's article was in that. So we sat down, and all the other members were watching all this, including the chairman of the committee and all. And we got into the discussion, and I showed him the book. I said, "Do you recognize this?" He said, "Oh, I recognize that." And so I flipped it open, and I said, "Would you sign this article for me?" It's a little funnier because I asked him, I said, "Do you want, after you sign it, I said, you want to put a disclaimer on it?" And then he came up, he says, "No," he says, "I've just read that recently." He says, "I wouldn't change a single word of it." So I told him, I said, "You know, you had influence on me when I read this. I was influenced with your position on the Federal Reserve." Of course, it is really a fantastic article and explaining the Depression and why the Federal Reserve created too much credit and all that. It was just perfect for what's happening today, but it doesn't seem like he's going to revert to his old ways. His explanation to me, though, is generally, well, you know, there are some merits for the gold standard and not having fiat money, but that's all that we have, and that's what I'm in charge of, and that's why I have to take care of it. So he becomes a monopolist. He becomes a monetary dictator. He tells us what interest rates should be. So that means that if you happen to be retired and have a CD and making 6%, he wants you to make 2.5%. He has the right to go and do it. And if it lowers it enough, he causes more distortions and causes people not to save and spend more and borrow more. All those fallacies and all those things that the Federal Reserve creates. But we're a long way off from that. There is no serious talk of that. Most members of Congress could care less about the monetary system, and especially after these last 10 years, they figure Greenspan is a saint, that he has done so much good and given us this grand prosperity. So I just wonder whether or not he will get the blame or somebody else. You know, in the election year of 90, the year 2000, Clinton renominated him about 9 months early because he wanted to do it to send out the signal that we're going to have stability, and I want Greenspan. So he was before the Banking Committee, and it went down the line. Everybody gave their opening statement saying they were praising him, they were bowing and all this stuff. And we are so glad you're back on it, and this sort of thing. And when it came my turn, I said, you know, I have a different opinion. I said, why don't you get out while the getting's good? And in many ways, it was about 2 months after that when we had the dot-coms bust. You know, that was the first bursting of the bubble. And now we have other minor problems around. Enron's there or gone. But there are a few more of those. So economic issues are going to be key. Now, the crisis it's building is related to 9/11 in one way. That's the immediate precipitating problem that we have. But the major crisis has come from a flawed foreign policy that has made us the members of the world, the policemen of the world, and has antagonized so many people. At the same time, we have a financial system built on paper money and debt. And now we have the economics turning against us. I am personally pleased that the recession was strongly identified before 9/11. Otherwise, it had nothing to do with economics. It had only to do with 9/11. But revenues are going down, and spending is going up, deficits are coming back, and there is no holding back on the war overseas. And there's very little holding back on the war against our liberties here at home. I consider the times in which we live as very, very dangerous. And your job is more appropriate and more necessary than ever before. Of course, I get asked questions constantly about, you know, the Libertarian Party, what's going to happen to it, how well are they doing, and this sort of thing. And my answer is that I don't know what the future is. But I know that they serve a very good purpose, and it's a very crucial purpose. After I ran in 88, for years afterwards, people would come up, and they still ask me today. They'll say, well, how did you do? And how many votes did you get? What was your percent? Those people who are asking have the perception that I got several percentage points and several million votes. And you all know how much poorer it was than that. But the perceptions are okay. If they think I did a lot better, that's all right.
From sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies.